Welcome everyone to episode 28 of the Phoenix Report. I'm Jack Connor. Now this time I have a guy who I've wanted to have on this show for a long time, and now seemed like the right time to do it. This is a guy who I go back with, almost 13 years now. This is a guy I've known since I was a freshman in college, and he's really been sort of intertwined in my career in music for many, many years. Back in 2003, I was a freshman in college. I went to the University of Tampa, which is a relatively small university downtown Tampa, Florida. And this guy was part of a really cool band there called Livespage. Now, you've heard me talk about this band before. In fact, in, I believe, episode 6, with Glenn Mungo, who was the drummer of that band. We definitely detailed the history of Livespage and how that whole thing came together. Well, this guy was the bass player of that band. I had originally knew him as a member of the university's jazz band, of which I was also a member. He actually played trombone in that band, strangely enough, but I found out that he was also a really, really talented bass player. And so, I had become aware of what they were doing on the side. These three guys who happened to be in the jazz band with me had their own band, and it was called Livespage. And being sort of like a small campus, being what it was, there definitely were not a lot of, other like student rock bands there at the time. So naturally, these guys were like the biggest thing going. Of course, all three of them being in fraternities didn't hurt either in terms of getting people there. And they were definitely the biggest thing going for a while. Well, Casey and I became really good friends, and he had ended up leaving the band. And ironically, John and Glenn, the other guys in the band, ended up calling me as the new bass player. Now, you would think that would be enough, to cause jealousy or, have guys bitter at each other for things like that, because technically I was his replacement in the band, which could make for an awkward situation, but that really wasn't the case. I ended up going to a different university after my freshman year, so it's just, we kind of fell out of contact for a few years there. I know he had pursued another career aspiration of his, and that was politics. He had internships in Washington, D.C. In fact, over the years, I would see him have several pictures with very important people over the years. People like former presidents, people who were going to be president, like a certain young senator by the name of Barack Obama, who maybe you've heard of. I don't know. So clearly this guy was doing a lot of different stuff there. And I had found out, we ended up reconnecting via YouTube of all things. I had found out that he was still living in Tampa, and he was actually an acoustic solo artist at the time. He would do covers, and fast forward to about 2009, I had ended up starting a new band, or I should say a new version of a band I was in before, WMP, became Impatient Nation, which was probably, next to the band I'm in right now, was probably the longest running band I've ever been in to this day. Impatient Nation was a situation where I was with three other guys who I knew, Justin Cully, Kyle McDowell, and Matt Raspo. They had wanted me to switch from bass to being the lead singer. And I was like, all right, well, I could stay on bass and sing, but I'd kind of rather have a guy who's really, really good on bass so I could just kind of concentrate on singing. So lo and behold, I ended up figuring out, this is like right around the same time where I found out about everything Casey was doing on his YouTube channel. I gave him a call. We hadn't spoken in a while, but it was really good to reconnect. And I told him, hey, I have this new thing that, it may become something. Why don't you come down and jam? And he hadn't even picked up a bass in a few years. He was mainly doing acoustic stuff, but he came down and that came together. And, for the next 2 years, Casey joined me, Matt, Kyle, and Justin on with Impatient Nation, and we had a lot of good times. We ended up making a record that to this day I'm very proud of. And in 2011, he ended up moving back to Denver, Colorado, where he's from originally. he ended up going to law school out there, and now is a lawyer, but is also now a blogger as well. He has created a new blog called Miles Away about his ventures into marathon running and how that's sort of made an impact on his life. And I know this is kind of a long sort of rambling intro, but it's hard to figure out just like one particular jumping off point because I've known this guy for so long and we've had so many different experiences together. And it's crazy how our careers and lives have intertwined, and even despite the fact that he lives far away from me now, that he's back across the country, on the other side, pretty much, that we've managed to keep in touch and stay friends through all these years. And I'm very glad to introduce just one of the most talented musicians I know, and also just one of the most high quality people I know. And please welcome Casey Krizman.
Hey, Jack, how's it going? Thank you for that.
Thanks, man. I was kind of all over the place. I was trying to figure out how I could write down like an intro and make it sound really cool and professional, but I mean, it's tough just because, like I said, we've known each other for so long, and it's hard because I know I wouldn't have had the career in music I've had without you being there, and vice versa. We've definitely kind of affected each other's lives in that way. So it's hard to like start from scratch and like and sum up everything that's happened.
You're absolutely right. There's so many threads going on that where would you start? Would you start in the jazz band or Lives page or Impatient Nation? You're right. It's kind of this big web that we've woven, and you're also absolutely right in the regard that I've certainly fed off of you over the years, and would call myself not only a better musician because of you, also had opportunities I wouldn't have had otherwise, and honestly a better person because I've known you. So it's a pleasure to be here, and hopefully we can give your listeners something good to listen to.
Well, I think so, and I mean that feeling is completely mutual. I definitely agree with what you're saying, and I feel the same way about you. So it's it's just a big love fest over here, folks. But yeah, I mean I do, and the listeners may not be aware of this, but you and I tried recording a podcast last week, and it was great. But for whatever reason, things didn't record correctly, and so here we are doing take 2 of it. Which I'm just going to lay that out there for everyone listening. This is not the first attempt at a podcast that we've had, but hopefully there won't be any more than this, because I have a feeling we're going to have a pretty good conversation. We had a good one last time, and
yeah.
So, but like I said,
we've had some practice.
Definitely, and we both do pretty well with the extra practice, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Nope.
It's like I said, it's hard to pinpoint an exact moment, when our sort of lives and careers sort of intersected. I remembered you as being the guy who was a sophomore when I was a freshman, had more experience. I was certainly intimidated when I first saw you pick up a bass, just because you were doing stuff that I hadn't really thought of. When it came to bass playing, you had you had this fretless bass, and you had such more like jazz and like jam band techniques to your playing, and you were a very technical player even then. So there was definitely a lot I learned from watching you play, and you would think that like the two of us being in the same band, even in different times, or like one of us replacing the other, would cause tension. But I mean, as far as I know, that was never really the case between us.
No, not at all. And it's funny the way that that Lives page went down, because the years tend to smooth things over. I think it might have been acrimonious to begin with. Mm-hmm. And I to be honest with you, I don't even feel that way and don't have those memories. I knew it was time for me to move on. But it's funny how all that kind of goes away. The good stuff lasts. John and I are friends, and actually have reconnected, and it's been real cool to see where his life has gone. The lead singer there, and then Glenn Mungo. I actually just found out today. I hate to love Facebook, but it's so good at things.
Right.
I found out today he's getting married this weekend.
Yeah.
So,
The funny thing is when I was recording my episode with him almost a year ago, he was telling me that he was getting ready to propose to his now fiance, soon to be wife. So that was like it was kind of crazy how that all came together. And now that that's happening, as we record this, he's about like a week away from his wedding. So it's yeah. So
good for him.
Yeah. No, Glenn's a great guy, and
To get back to your point, even when it may have been a little rough with me and John and Glenn, when I found out that you had taken over, I don't want this to sound like it's just a corny love fest, but it's genuine. I was happy for you. I knew you were a fantastic bassist. I knew that you were dedicated. And when I heard they had taken you on, it was like, oh, rock on. That's exactly the direction that both you and the band needed to go. So I was happy for you guys, and that never really hurt our friendship, yours and mine.
No. I didn't think so.
No, and you mentioned it's hard to pinpoint a first thought, and I mentioned this on the first time we did this, but it's important to me because I remember my first memory of you, man. We're in the jazz band. I'm playing the trombone, and it's just an image, like a 3x5 camera picture of you on one knee opening up your guitar case.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't necessarily something that you did, but you must have made an impression because, when I think of early Jack, when I think of 2003 Jack, that picture is it will always be that way. So that's my pinpoint for when Jack entered my life, and so I have that image, I have that exact moment, and it's cool to see how things have evolved from there.
Definitely. And I mean, going back to what Lives page was when I first met you and first met the guys, yeah, you guys were definitely sort of. I thought it was interesting how it all came together, where it's like you had this trio of guys. They were playing. It was like a combination of like sort of like more like free form like jam kind of music, but still had a very like hard rocking edge, and definitely. I mean, it was definitely like very reminiscent of like 90s alt rock. I mean, even though it was like 2003 or so, but it was very much like a combination of that and like jam band music, and you're certainly a little different than what the band had become when I joined, but
Right.
but there were elements of it. It seemed like the perfect. It was like the perfect college rock band, basically. You could find. And I don't mean that in a negative way or like belittling or anything, but just
I love it.
time.
I love it because that was my experience. John came to me. Well, actually, John didn't come to me. I knew Glenn. We both lived our freshman year. There wasn't room for us on campus, so we actually lived at the Holiday Inn, and so I knew Glenn from the Holiday Inn, and we had rushed fraternities. He pledged a different one than I did, but we'd stayed friends. And then I met John through Glenn, and John says, I love Pearl Jam and I love Led Zeppelin, and then just to give you the little jam band influence, and he says, and I love Dispatch, and that really encompasses kind of what we were. We were it was this hard rock with a little bit of with kind of, as you said, flowing fluidity to it, and you said it was the perfect rock band, college rock band, and that was my experience. I mean, I wore jeans with big old holes in the knees and sleeveless shirts, and we took black and white pictures, looking off into the distance, as one would do back in the 90s.
Sure.
And I wouldn't trade that for anything. That was exactly my experience. I love rock, 90s rock. So I'm glad to be associated with the 90s alt rock movements.
Absolutely, and you guys were certainly doing stuff that was different from like your average radio band, and that you definitely had that jam element of it, where you guys would go up and you'd have the song, but it would also like you'd have extended solo parts and just a really dynamic live band. I always thought.
Thanks. Yeah, we had a lot of fun. John and I actually lived together for a point in time.
Right.
And he and I were both type A personalities. And And so it was a lot of fun. We would, there'd be times where there'd be, 5-6 minute guitar solos, and he and I would be back to back, kind of rocking in rhythm, or
Sure.
kind of shouldering each other, just getting. I mean, we let out a lot of emotion on stage, and that was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And you guys you guys were together for about a year or two, I want to say, and you had gone on to do some pretty cool things in a relatively short amount of time. Like you would manage to get on the local stage of the Warped Tour when it was in St. Petersburg, and you opened up for Collective Soul, I think, at one point, and also a little band called Shinedown. They were an up and coming rock band at the time.
Yeah, we did a local stint throughout there were a couple other stops other than St. Pete, but that was super cool. We were on the Hurley stage, which was one of the smaller stages, and as I told you before, when I tell the story, this one was just so much fun. Well, I don't know. It would have been more fun if we'd have been in the tour buses, but as you looked out at the bands backstage, the parking lot at the Warped Tour, it was tour bus, tour bus, tour bus, my Cavalier, tour bus, tour bus, tour bus.
Right.
We were definitely low men on the totem pole, but and actually those were the fruits of a woman named Birgit.
Yes.
Who had tried to sign us.
That's right.
So,
I ended up meeting Birgit at one point. Birgit von Schondorf, I think what her name was.
Yeah, and so it was she had recruited us to manage our band. We were coming up in Tampa, certainly getting larger, and playing, as you said, for opening for Shinedown, Default. We may have opened for Collective Soul. I don't remember that, though, to be honest with you. But we were doing a lot of stuff. Let's just put it that way.
Definitely. And to your point, I had actually met Birgit von Schondorf, when I was in the band as well. And I think she had approached us with signing with her back then, but for whatever reason, the guys didn't want to do it, so that was that. But she was really nice to me. I always got along with her well. I've been trying to reconnect with her recently, but I don't know. I haven't been able to locate her. So Birgit, if you're out there, give me a shout.
Hi, Birgit.
But yeah, no, I mean, especially for being young guys. I don't know if you had really been in a lot of bands before Lives Page, growing up in Colorado, but
yeah, I had been. We had the high school band,
right?
Me and my best friends. We played at talent shows and parties, and actually we kept the band in Denver going for several years. Actually, while I was even in college. Obviously nothing going on when I was in Florida, but every summer I'd come back and we'd play. At least, there was a big summer party that would be hosted, and we would get together and play that. But I joined Lives Page when I was 18, freshman year of college. There's not a whole lot more experience to be had than that high school band. So it was, we were doing it for the first time. We knew we wanted to do it. That was the biggest driving force, was all three of us had gone to school with certainly other aspirations. But the most important, well, not the most important thing, I should say, but one of the most important things was we wanted to try to make it in the rock business. And so from day one, we had specific goals, mainly get famous,
right?
And whatever we had to do to get there. And so we were a very serious band in terms of they talk about the band live being a very serious band, but still able to make good music and have fun. And I'd like to think that that's what we were doing, because we certainly had fun together. It seemed people enjoyed the music. I obviously lived on longer after I left, so we must have been doing something right. But it was great times.
Absolutely, and I think it was a unique situation where you were young guys in college. You were still very serious about college. You were still going. You guys weren't delinquents or anything, but at the same time, you took it very seriously. You took the band very seriously, and it wasn't just sort of a passing hobby for you guys. You guys were really trying to make it happen, and you did in a relatively short amount of time. and which, I mean, it's impressive.
Thanks. Yeah, it's we might get into some of the more philosophical things later, but there are many points in my life where I look back and in many ways I've lived a very blessed, a charmed life, and in one of those regards is, yeah, so we didn't make the platinum album, but we made an album, and I'm very proud of it. We opened, some of the experiences I had before I was 21. Some people, wait a lifetime hoping for. So I'm very thankful to have had that experience, and I'm honestly glad that when I left, you got to have a similar experience.
Definitely. I mean, I don't know if I had quite the same experience you did, because I think the three of you guys were young single guys at the time, being in college, getting all that attention. I don't know if I quite got up to that, but I mean, then again, I was in a relationship at the time, and so
Right.
you do what you got to do. But yeah, no, I'm sure there must have been a lot of fun times that were had.
Well, with Mungo going down now and getting married next weekend, just put it on the record that I wouldn't have bet this ever, especially I was in a relationship for much of Lives Page. I'm now the only one to not have gotten married at this point between the four of us.
I know, it's like it's almost like you've won the pot at the end of the rainbow.
Yeah, I guess the grass is always greener, but yeah. Um, but yeah, I would have lost a bet on that one for sure.
Nice. Wasn't that like the movie Tomcats with Jerry O'Connell, where it's like the last guy to be single, wins the pot or whatever? I don't know.
Yeah, that rings a bell, but I'll take the gold. Give me the gold.
There you go. Well, you fought it kicking and screaming, sir, and I salute you for that. But
I'd say I dodged a few bullets along the way. Let's put it that way.
yeah. No, we all have. But no, I mean, it was definitely good times back then for sure, and I definitely got to witness quite a bit of that firsthand. But that's another story for another time.
Yes, sir.
But yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, you did end up leaving the band, and I know that there was some animosity between yourself and John at that point, which I think, as you mentioned, like two type A personality guys, when you're young and you're passionate about stuff, and if people start to have different ideas, I can see how there would be like a clash, especially when you're younger, because I think it's like you don't quite, it's like when you're that age, you don't always quite have the emotional maturity to figure out how to resolve conflicts as easily as they can be.
Yeah, and it's funny. It's starting to come back to me a little bit. And what I'll chalk it up to is all of us were, again, so serious, and we had a lot of talent, and so there was potential there. And I think when it got acrimonious, it was really only because we all wanted to make it work. We just had different ideas about how that would go about.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, any breakup at any point in time when it first happens is not going to be real smooth. But, looking back on it, so since then, John and I have reconnected. He's up in Massachusetts, joined the military, has a kid, has a wife.
Yeah.
He and I actually follow each other on Strava, the running app that we use.
Oh yeah.
So I get to see pictures. A lot of times he'll take the kid in a stroller and run, and then do stations where he's doing core exercises or things of that nature. He'll take a picture with his kid, and it's incredible to see that this guy that I used to 3 hours into a set be sweating together through a guitar solo,
Right.
And much different manner. We're both running for our health and running for our lives and our sanity. So it's just a really cool, life is a beautiful thing, man, and it's cool to see these evolutions occur. So you're right. We probably didn't have we weren't advanced enough in our we were as advanced as we could be for 18, 19, 20, but that has its limitations. So yeah, things went down. We broke up, but they certainly did very well by replacing you. And
Thank you.
And actually, I started doing. I don't know if you know this actually. thus started my solo career, and not solo. It started my acoustic going. I had never been a singer in a band before, and when I left Lives Page, I joined a couple of other friends from the University of Tampa, Adam Gordon and Rohit Pradhan.
Okay.
And we started a band called Jameson and played, places like Yeoman's Pub. And so it wasn't serious at all, but it was my first entree into trying to sing. And we had a lot of fun. It was certainly not nearly as serious as Lives Page was.
Did you ever play with a guy named Zach Fisher?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't stick out to me.
Gotcha.
So probably not.
Gotcha. Now he was another guy I knew from like after that, and I thought I had heard something about you guys playing together, but it might have been nothing.
Oh, Zach Fisher. Yeah, he was ROTC Navy.
Yeah.
Yeah. He and I played a couple times. Wow, you just opened up like a chamber in my brain that hadn't been used in a decade. Holy cow.
Yeah, really nice guy.
Yeah.
Drummer, guitar player. I think he did a few different things, but.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what projects we worked on, because I remember him. I played drums with him. He might have been in the jazz band too, but we certainly played together outside of the jazz band. But what a really good guy. I wonder what he's up to. Have you been in contact with him at all? Or?
I think he's on Facebook with me or something, but I'd have to tag him out there. Zach, if you're listening, let us know, man.
Yeah, what a good guy. He was just one of those genuine humans. I really liked Zach. I'm sorry it took me a minute to unlock that. First of all, I'm impressed with your memory for names. His last name is something that's quite impressive. But I think there's something to be said about out of sight, out of mind. And, having moved back to Denver, I don't open those chambers very often.
Oh, yeah. I mean, of course. I mean,
I'm impressed with the recall, sir.
Thanks, man. My short-term memory isn't that great, but long-term, I think I do okay sometimes.
So can I'm going to ask you a question, if that's
yeah, go for it.
It's been a while at least. Why don't you give us a taste of a little bit about what Lives Page looked like while you were in it, and what was going on then?
Let's see. I joined them, I want to say, the beginning of 2005. I was still like jamming with a bunch of other musicians trying to get something going, but I didn't really, I knew that I wanted to be a singer, but I also enjoyed playing bass. I just didn't really have a lot of experience about how to I was writing songs, but some of them weren't that good. And when they called me, it just sounded like a great opportunity because I hadn't really been in a real functioning band up until that point. I'd been playing for a few years, but so it was just an exciting thing for me. I knew Glenn obviously really well from jazz band. I knew John a little bit. I mean, because he was kind of a quieter guy at that point, so I didn't really know John as well. But he and I, we became pretty good friends. And I joined at the same time as another guy, Brian Montgomery, who ended up being the band's second guitar player. So right. Brian and I ended up bonding because we were the new guys coming in, and Brian was a little bit older, and I think he and I were both in pretty serious relationships at the time. John and Glenn were single dudes having a lot of fun, and so it was kind of came at it with a different aspect. And I was never much of a partier guy, but
right.
So. In that respect, things were a little bit different, but we always got along really well. And I think as time went on, they started to use me a lot more for vocal stuff. I wasn't really writing with the band a lot.
Okay.
It became, but there would be times when I would sing back up a lot, or John's mic would go out, or his guitar would go down, and I would cover a few lines or whatever, and it worked out pretty well. And I think that added a lot. The band definitely changed when Brian and I joined. There was definitely a heavier direction. I think we still incorporated the recording you did of that song "Come Home" into the record that we did. We just kind of reused that track, and I think that was one of the only tracks we ended up playing live from when you were in the band.
Right.
But yeah, no, I mean that was my first band, and I learned so much from being around those guys, and it was an incredible experience. Towards the end, I ended up leaving because they wanted to go on the road for months at a time, and a year before that, like the first year I was in, we went on a tour for 10 days up and down the East Coast. And it was us and another band called Last Day Alive, and that was a really, really cool experience because it's something like I'll have stories I'll be able to tell for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
From that one. But at the same time, it's like it was 10 days on the road, and we had no label support. There were 8 of us crammed in a van, and we were all broke and tired by the end of it, and hungry, and all this other kind of stuff. And I just couldn't imagine doing that for 3 months.
Yeah.
And I had like an internship lined up because I was a geography major, and just I had like career stuff to think about beyond music.
Right.
And so and beyond that, I was just, I felt like they had kind of made up their mind to do it, and they were going to do it with or without me. So I just decided to bow out.
Okay.
And there were a couple other dysfunctional things, like Brian had already been kicked out at the time. I didn't really agree with that 100%. And so like the dynamic had kind of shifted by the time that I ended up leaving. We had a couple new guys coming in, but nothing really panned out. And it was also a situation where like those guys, when they weren't going to school, it's like, there would be guys who didn't have cars and didn't have transportation. I would have to pick people up and take them everywhere. And it just, I almost felt like, I almost feel like things are being taken advantage of. And in hindsight, I don't think that's what they were trying to do. I think I was just overreacting to things at a couple times. So it was a very tense time overall.
Right.
And
the drama's real, man. I mean, you don't think that you're in it when you're in it. You're like, oh, the drama of all these bands that you hear about, that's not us. But when you're living the day to day, sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees, and you look back at it. Anyway, yeah. But so the 10-day tour up the East Coast, that seems pretty cool.
It was like we got to play the Lion's Den in Greenwich Village in New York City.
Oh wow.
So, I mean, we got to play up there. We got to play like Syracuse, New York. I think we went as far as Buffalo, maybe Oswego, which I think is like right on one of the Great Lakes.
Oh my! And you started driving in Tampa?
Yeah, we started in Tampa, and I think the last night was in Atlanta at the Masquerade, which is like a legendary club out there.
Wow.
It was on a Sunday night and nobody was there, but we still played the Masquerade, and it was pretty rad.
Yeah.
So, just, the constant, being in a van together with like 7 other dudes was pretty intense.
So let me tell you a story if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, go for it.
So, and this is kind of in honor of the hurricane that's going through. Is it a hurricane? I don't know. But anyway, massive storm. So summer of 2004 was the summer of hurricanes for Florida. We had Charlie, Gene, Francis, and Ivan.
Yeah, I remember.
That was also when Birgit was courting us, and she had lined up a spot for us at the Big Spring Jam in Huntsville, Alabama. And have I told you this one before?
I don't think so.
Okay. So, cell phones were not ubiquitous like they are now.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have one. And so she was already up there. There was some concern. I remember we were concerned about whether once we got to Huntsville, we'd actually have a gig. But she assured us in some way, shape, or form that we would. And Glenn had just gotten a Jeep Cherokee, a used Jeep Cherokee, and we were going to take that up from Tampa to Huntsville. And so we actually were outside my condo, which was a little farther away from downtown Tampa, loading up the truck, and I hope Glenn Spanky doesn't get mad at me for telling this story now. But anyway, I see Glenn checking the fluids of the car. So I just assume, his new car. Glenn seemed like he probably knew cars. Assumed everything was cool. So we get on the road. We get to Macon, Georgia. We're about to turn west and go into Alabama from Macon. And we stop at a gas station, and his engine is steaming. And he opens up the hood, and the engine just kind of, there aren't any sparks, but fluid-wise, this thing just kind of explodes.
Oh, no.
And so, and we're 19, maybe we were 20 at the 2004. Yeah, we were 20 at this point. Okay, so we're 20 years old, and our car just explodes in Macon. Beer gets trying to get us to Huntsville. Obviously we're not going to rent a car, so we didn't get there.
Right.
We didn't have credit cards; those weren't ubiquitous at the time either.
Right.
So we end up going to a Pep Boys the next day. I remember the tow truck driver that night kind of shook us down and kind of charged us. I don't remember, but we got shook down a little bit. The tow trucks have a lot of them are the company made Jerdan, Jerdan.
Mm-hmm.
The guys told us, they're like, yeah, we're Jerry and Dan. We own this company. And we didn't know any better. We were, young and dumb.
Right.
So we drop. So anyway, we're at Pep Boys. We're stranded in Macon. We have no other way to get home. We have to get his car fixed. We have no money. Call up my mom. She fronts a credit card, pays for that. And at this point in time, we've lost Big Spring, or we've missed Big Spring Jam, and basically we drove to Macon, spent $600 on our car, and have to drive home. That was the trip. So,
right.
And I just remember John was so mad at Spanky at the time, at Glenn, and so they had me drive because John didn't want Glenn driving, and John was also just too mad to drive. And so we drove through Hurricane Francis. Which was one of the larger, just drenching storms. It wasn't small and compact like Charlie. It was, it engulfed all of Florida at one time. And so I'm driving down I-75 from Macon, and you'd be able to drive for about 15 minutes as one of the hurricane bands goes, is kind of like there's a space, and then a band would come through again. We'd have to pull over the side with our flashers. Semis were still going down. We're hoping they see us. It's rocking the cars. We're on the side of the road. We kept trying to get hotels, but because of the hurricane, all the hotels were booked.
Oh, jeez.
And so I ended up driving through Hurricane Francis in Glenn's Cherokee, which also retains water in the wheel well, or not the wheel. The footwell. So my feet are all pruned up, and I'm wearing, I'm barefoot driving through a hurricane for hours after missing the Big Spring. It was just, it's one of those stories that you couldn't make it up if you tried to. It's just such a good story. Obviously, we were miserable at the time. Nobody was happy, but it's one of those life experiences that you look back and you laugh, but.
I'm amazed you got out of there alive. Driving that Cherokee, that already had problems. You're driving through a freaking hurricane. That's insane.
Yeah, it was something else. I mean, things I wouldn't do now that I'm older. Now that I'm smarter, I would have found a way to not drive through a hurricane. But at the time, it seemed like the best option we had.
Right. It might have been the only option you had.
Anyway, there you have it.
To counter that, to counter that, when we were doing the 10-day tour, it was in August of 2005. I remember coming back, driving down I-75 in Florida, seeing a ton of power trucks go the other way, toward go northbound as we were heading south. I remember driving and looking over and be like, that's a little weird. Wonder where they're all going. Sure enough, when we get back, we turn on the news, and it's Hurricane Katrina.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things, like when you're on the road and doing your thing, you're kind of in a little bit of a bubble. You don't necessarily know what's going on, but right as soon as we got back was when all the stuff from Katrina was going down. So it's that to me is always going to be logged in my memory as that particular time and place.
Wow. Let me segue that for you, man. This is going to blow your mind.
Yeah.
You mentioned an internship in DC. That started the Monday after Katrina hit land.
Wow.
So you talk about your trip being defined, or Katrina being defined by your trip, or vice versa. My entire time in Washington, D.C. is basically defined by Hurricane Katrina. So while you were touring the Northeast, I was wearing a suit and going to the Capitol. So I think you might have been having a little bit more fun than us. But just kind of little parallels how our lives are, you know,
Well, definitely, but I mean,
common experience.
I'm sure that must have been an exciting place to work though at that time, considering all the craziness that was going on and just being there right in the Capitol. As I mean, politically, obviously that was a big thing, but still, that must have been really interesting to do. But no, I mean that whole period from '04 to '09, you were working there in D.C. and pursuing politics, and pursuing possibly thinking about a career in law, and
Yep.
also doing the acoustic stuff. Like the band stuff wasn't really on the radar, but you were still pursuing something that you were passionate about.
Yeah. So I went to DC. Politics had always kind of, well, actually, anyway, went to DC. A great experience. It was in large part centered around Katrina, gas prices, or price gouging. That was kind of the first time since the 80s that had resurfaced. Things were big, and obviously the FEMA response was lacking in areas, and so the congresswoman I worked for was on the House Commerce Committee, Energy and Commerce Committee, so it was a very busy time. Anyway, while I was there, I met Jim Davis, who's the former governor or former congressman in Tampa, who was running for governor in 2006 of Florida.
Mm-hmm.
So I met him and I joined his campaign when I came back. He ran unsuccessfully in 2006, but he was the party's nominee. An incredible experience, man. I don't know if I've ever gone into detail with you about this, but I started it was my senior year at the University of Tampa. I started as an intern on the finance team.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, logging donations. They hired me upon graduation to do what's called a call time assistant, where Jim Davis would make fundraising phone calls. I was a third ear on the line, taking notes, making sure follow-up gets, if this guy wants to see his policy plan on this in order to consider a donation, we'd get it to him type deal. And very quickly, I'm 22 years old, and 2006, very quickly, all of a sudden, I'm traveling with him. He's going around all over the state of Florida, up to D.C. to make crucial votes in D.C., and I'm his traveling finance guy. And there were many times where it was just he and I on a plane to DC to make a vote at 2:00 in the morning and fly back. Incredible. And I'm going to try to condense this because I'm known to be long-winded, and these are some good stories, but I don't want to bore anyone.
No, it's fine. Go ahead.
So we won the primary in July of. Might have been August, but anyway, 2006. We win the primary, and we pick a lieutenant gubernatorial candidate, much like you pick a VP candidate.
Right.
And the guy that we picked had endorsed our opponent in the primary. Wasn't a big fan of the way we were trying to run our campaign, and all of a sudden we pick him. I'm in the room when Jim picks him and calls him up. And the next day we do a big rollout, like 5 different events throughout the state, starting in Miami, ending in Pensacola, hitting everywhere in between. And there's a role in a campaign called a body man, and it's much like you do everything from wake them up in the morning, tell them what to eat, what not to eat, who to talk to, who not to talk to, what to say, what to never say again. Basically just at their side at all times, doing everything you can to aid and assist. Obviously, the lieutenant gubernatorial candidate didn't have a body man. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of jumped into that role I was doing finance, but I knew this guy needed somebody right next to him that day. End of the day, we actually ended up back in Tampa. Sorry, I said Pensacola earlier, but we ended up back in Tampa, which is where we were based.
Oh, okay.
And I remember at the end of the last fundraiser, I went up to Jim and And I said, hey, I want to be Daryl's body man. And Jim looked at me and he said, you know, Daryl's going to need a lot of support because of, having endorsed our opponent in the primary and not necessarily buying into, I mean, he bought in, but, there was some friction there. He said, he's going to need someone very, very strong. And this is where I'm expecting him to say, yeah, and a 22-year-old is just not cut out to do that. And he looks at me and he says, and I think you're perfect for the job. One of the coolest moments of my life, honestly. I'll never forget it. And from that point on, it was me and Daryl rolling through all 67 counties of Florida, raising money, doing a bunch of voter outreach for months. There was a time where I went home for 6 weeks. And when I was home, it was for 8 hours. I remember looking in the cupboards, trying to see what I needed for the next trip, and realizing everything I needed was already packed in a bag. But I met Bill Clinton. I met future President Barack Obama.
Mm-hmm.
I met Secretary of State Clinton.
Mm-hmm.
All the other guys. I mean, 2006 was a big year for star-studded Democrats, and I witnessed them all. It was an incredible experience.
I'll bet.
Anyway, we lost.
Right. Well, but still, I mean, getting that sort of experience again, like what, going back to the whole thread about having life experience and, having stuff like that, that's something that you'll always be able to remember. You'll always be able to tell, be like, yeah, I met President Clinton. I met President Obama before he was the president and all this other stuff. I think it's just an incredible experience. And, and not to get off on too much of a side tangent, but I mean,
Sure.
Things, in our country are politically, crazy right now,
Sure.
putting it mildly. I don't want to get into a whole big thing about the election, but does
Right.
that like discourage you about pursuing politics as a possible career in the future, or is it something you're still excited about?
I'm very much still excited about it. It's unfortunate that we're currently where we are. What I'm going to offer some optimism in this day and age that you don't get very often. And
Sure.
I'm not going to go ideologically anywhere, but I can tell you this: when we were running in 2006, we thought that if our opponent won, it would be the end of Florida. It was basically good versus wrong, 100%. And I would venture I'm not trying to make any enemies here. Well, let's just put it this way. 4 years later, the country was still, or the state was still afloat. The country was still afloat.
Right.
So all that fire and brimstone that we thought was going on in 2006, it's very similar to what I think is going on now. I think it's just being felt on a larger scale. So, I find myself, urging caution and calm. And, things may not be great, but I don't think they're as bad. And obviously, some people have it bad off, and people are hurting from the economy, et cetera. That's always going to be the case.
Sure.
I would just say, hey guys, hold on, we're going to be okay. Whether my candidate wins or loses, or your candidate wins or loses, I believe in America, and I believe in our abilities to solve problems. We're gonna be okay.
And the beauty of it is, every 4 years you get to decide again. So
Yeah.
And that's what makes our country great. And again, I don't really even like to talk about politics on this show or anything like that. But it's like you find so many people with such extreme views on both sides.
Sure.
And I mean, I tend to be I'd like to think I'm a pretty moderate guy. I certainly have my opinions on things, and you and I don't always agree with each other on stuff.
Right.
But I mean, I think the fact that, I don't know where I was going with this, but basically, I think just, hopefully cooler heads will prevail, and as long as people put the country first and not individual agendas or,
Right.
party agendas, then I think we'll be okay. So we'll see.
Yeah, and I don't want to get too deep again, but just to finish it off, what I'm urging is pragmatism. And you asked if I'm still excited about it. I still I've got some things in the works now, and have some aspirations politically for me. And for anybody who's on the right or on the conservative and is starting to want to turn your podcast off, I say stop. I just this January, a good friend of mine, an attorney here in Denver, I ran his campaign for a vacancy election to the Colorado State House. He's a Republican, and I managed his campaign. So
there you go.
I'm preaching pragmatism. It's the best man for the job, best man and woman for the job. And but since we did touch on politics, I just wanted to urge folks, we'll be okay.
Definitely. This is, to paraphrase someone else, this is definitely the ultimate no spin zone. I'm not all about spinning it, anyway, whatever, Let
me throw one more out there. Just because,
all right.
I don't care who you vote for, vote. Make sure your voice is counted. We're in the greatest democracy in the world, and make sure that you raise your voice from whoever that is. Large party, small party, male, female, black, white. Make sure your voice is heard. That's all I've got.
Very good stuff. All right. Anyways, let's get back into the fun stuff. Let's get back into music.
Certainly, I thought we were in the fun stuff.
Certainly, you're doing a little bit of acoustic stuff from that period, like 04 to the 09, 04 through 09. I mean, I know I found out about your stuff through YouTube, as you mentioned. We had kind of reconnected through there. Yeah. When I first called you about Impatient Nation, about this thing I was doing, it wasn't even called Impatient Nation yet, but it was this new band I was doing with some old friends of mine. Where were you musically at that point?
Yeah, so at that point, actually, so real quick to sum up the next 3 years, we lost that campaign in 06, and I very quickly found myself out of a job. Ended up going into public finance advising. I was a financial advisor for cities and municipalities for 4.5 years, someplace I never thought I'd be. And it's a very dry job, working in Excel. I enjoyed my job, but it didn't provide for me the expression of passion that every other either job or endeavor had afforded me, whether it be music or politics. I didn't get a chance to express my passion for arbitrage rebate compliance, as it were. So I, on the side, started playing a lot of guitar. I met a friend of mine named Bradley Aikman. Mm-hmm. Incredible voice, great guitarist, real nice guy, fantastic father. He's got 4 beautiful kids. Anyway, met him through a mutual friend, found out that he was doing a bunch of YouTube videos, and he was actually quite big. I don't know how many followers he has now, but it was big at the time, and he's still doing it. And so I started kind of mimicking him. He was Brad in Tampa, and check him out. He's incredible. And I was Casey in Tampa, and don't feel so inclined to check that out.
I'm going to plug it anyway. Don't worry about it.
So I did that, and he and I did some ones together, and it was actually fun. You remember the band Bare Naked Ladies?
Oh, of course.
So when YouTube first got big, they did a bunch of covers of their music in the bathroom. The two main guys, and they called them the bathroom sessions.
Really?
And acoustically it was kind of cool. It's a little weird, but it's Bare Naked Ladies. You expect them to be weird.
Sure.
So Bradley and I, the first cover we ever did together was "If I Had $1 Million" by Bare Naked Ladies. And we were camping when we did it, so we went out to Alafaya State Park and put up our computer and our microphones in a campsite. We're really roughing it at this point, right? And record the song. We ended up doing, I think, 8 or 9 of these videos. We called them the campfire sessions. And some of them were camping, some of them weren't, but it was whenever Bradley and I got together. Anyway, so I was doing that. It was just a way for me to express, continue my love for music, to express myself. I was doing originals and covers. And it honestly served a purpose, because at this point I'd been away from my family for 7, 8, 9 years, a lot longer than I thought. I thought I was just going to Florida for undergrad.
Right.
So it was a good way for my mom and my family to be able to see me actually, see how I was doing, see that I'm doing all right. So it served a lot of purposes, but it was very low key. I was developing chops on the acoustic guitar, but I hadn't touched the bass. And you called me up, and I don't know if you want to tell the story or you want me to tell the story.
Well, I mean, it was just one of those things where, I was, for some reason, and this goes on to this day, I think bass players in general seem to be one of the hardest instruments to find. I feel. I don't know. I don't necessarily know why that is. Maybe the guitars and drums are a little bit of a sexier instrument for guys to want to learn.
Yeah, we're all hiding under rocks. All the bassists are under rocks.
I guess so. Yeah. Well, we're a different breed for sure.
Yeah.
But
absolutely.
But I mean, it wasn't. I mean, but that certainly wasn't necessarily why I called you. It was just, I think at first, I wasn't even sure if you were still living in Tampa or if you were back in DC, but I found out that you were living in Tampa. And so I gave you a call and I was like, hey, I don't know if this is something you'd be interested in, but I've known these guys for a little bit and, how would you feel about coming down and jamming, and here's some of the music we've been working on and let us know what you think. And it was just basically like that. And I think you were like, well, I don't even know if I have, enough gear or whatever. And I'm like, all right, well, I mean, I have gear, so it's like,
yeah.
If you got to use some of my bass gear, you can, but, feel free to come down, bring what you have. And the funny thing is, I don't remember, talking to the other guys, deciding, hey, is this the guy? Is this the guy? It just kind of happened. I think we had just, because I don't remember all of us sitting down. Well, should we continue jamming with Casey or not? It just kind of, I don't remember that part of it. I'm sure we did have that conversation, but it was just one of those things where it seemed to click right away, which I was surprised about because those guys up to that point, they had been playing together since they were little kids, and it wasn't always easy for outside guys to kind of break into that circle, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and I mean, it's possible I might have just, taken up residency as a squatter, and you guys didn't have a choice. I don't know. No.
Well, it wasn't at my house. I don't know. I don't know. So
no, that first practice, I was timid, man. You said that you were intimidated when you first met me in 2003. I was intimidated 6 years later. I knew that you'd been playing. I knew that you had your chops. I hadn't picked up the bass for anything real serious since I left Lives Page, really. Maybe anyway. And so I was intimidated, and I didn't have the gear. You're right. I didn't have a stack any longer. I remember you had I don't know if you still do, the Harkey stack, which is just a beast.
I do, yeah. It's I mean, I haven't used it in a while. It's still in my garage, but yeah, I've got it.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good piece of equipment.
Yes, it is.
But I remember seeing you guys, and I kind of took a back seat in that first jam session. I wanted to see what you guys were doing. I didn't want to step on toes, and I certainly didn't want to make a fool out of myself in my first. And I think you kind of pushed me a little bit, to the extent that you ever get pushy, which doesn't happen. But you were like, hey, it's time for you to play. So I stepped in, and I think I might have even played your bass because I knew I've got a Warwick fretless. I love it. Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful, beautiful axe, but it wasn't cut out for Impatient Nation. And honestly, the next day, I went out and got an Ernie Ball Music Man.
That's right.
It would eat your children if it had to.
Oh yeah.
Just for Impatient Nation. I'd been eyeing the bass for a long time, but Impatient Nation was the impetus. And you mentioned the guys were, had been playing together, kind of seemingly insular, but I just felt welcomed right away. It was, you and I had developed a long rapport together. And had been buddies for a while, so it was real easy to come in with you, and I think in a way, not that Kyle and Justin and Matt, we all got along very well, There wasn't a whole lot of strife going on with the band. But the fact that you had mentioned, I don't know if it was this time around or in our last podcast, that you and I kind of balanced out the balance of power. You and I were buddies and kind of were able to I'm not saying it right. You and I we meshed well together, and it may have helped out any type of awkwardness from me not having known those guys for so long.
Well, I think you coming in brought sort of a fresh coat of paint on what those guys had been doing for so many years. I think, I think the fact that you came in with sort of that jam band background, for lack of a better term. I mean, or at least you had.
I hate that term. Can we kill that term?
No, we can. I'm not. I mean, you weren't like a fish guy or anything like that, or nothing like that. I should rephrase that. I should say that you had a more diverse background than your average like hard rock bass player. I mean, yeah, because the stuff we were doing was pretty heavy, but there were elements of different like genres of music in there, and I think that helped kind of bridge the gap a little bit, at least to them, because those guys came in with a lot of different influences, at the time as well. And even like now to this day, like I think, Matt is in a completely different kind of band. Justin is doing a lot of producing. Kyle doesn't really play anymore, but when he does, he's into a lot of different stuff. So it just, it became, I think that served you well in terms of like showing that, okay, this guy isn't just a, random run of the mill bass player. He's capable of doing a lot of other stuff and being versatile. And I think that served you really well when you came in.
Yeah. And well, thank you. To go from zero to versatile, in the span of a short amount of time, having not played, that's quite a compliment. But one of the greatest things I liked about Impatient Nation was how technical things were. The riffs were very technical. And not necessarily, I don't want people to hear the music and say, oh, this guy, thinks that this is, Victor Wooten or something like that.
Right.
But no, our riffs were crisp. They were concise. They were alliterative. They were rhythmically, they would mirror each other and kind of mathematical in a sense. And that's what really intrigued me about the music, aside from, the fantastic lead vocals. But
well, thank you.
But just how serious, in a different way, how serious the music was. We knew what we were doing. It wasn't just, 3 chords and then a verse, chorus out. We were trying to make, we were composing in a way.
Mm-hmm.
There, I'll leave it at that. And I really liked that about Impatient Nation.
Definitely, and certainly my aim was always to do this, and I try to do this as well with my current band right now, is to make stuff that's, it's musically exciting, but at the same time it's digestible, hopefully for, sort of, people who aren't necessarily musicians, who aren't necessarily looking for like, uber progressive or technical music.
Yeah.
Hopefully songs that, that are catchy enough where people like. I think like to this day, my mom will be like, why don't you guys play Anger? And I'm like, Mom, I'm not in that band anymore.
Nice. Nice.
Like,
no,
she's like, I really liked the song Impatient Nation, though. I thought that was a really. I'm like, I know, but I'm not with those guys anymore. It's a different deal. But it's, you know how that goes. But
no, and to that end, my mom still, I think she's got the 6 CD player in her car, and 2 of them, actually probably 3 of them. My high school band, Lives Page, and Impatient Nation. And I don't think those CDs have ever left her car. And if you saw my mom, you would know that her music of choice is not heavy metal, but yet Impatient Nation has never left her car.
There you go. There you go.
See my mom rolling down the street rocking out to "We're all a part of an Impatient Nation."
Yeah, man.
No, and that was talking about digestible. That was one of the things I thought you brought really well to that band, because it was so technical musically. The lyrics were catchy. They were on point. they were discernible, which is, you wouldn't think you had to ask for that in a band, but you were able to understand what you were saying, and you tend to have a theme, which is, and I don't know if you still do, but in Impatient Nation you had a theme, and it reflects who you are, which is, I'm going to overcome any challenge you throw at me. And so even though Impatient Nation has this kind of sound of complacency, or and certainly there was this feeling that things aren't exactly how I want them now, but you always had this, I'm willing to do what it takes to get through this. And I found that theme throughout all of your lyrics, and I still enjoy it to this day when I listen to that album.
Well, cool. That's cool, man. I'm glad you noticed that, and that's something. I mean, I don't know if I have a particular theme or message to express whenever I write songs. I think like anyone else, you just take it from how you look at the world and how you experience things. And I hope that, and if people are able to get that emotion out of something that I write, then I know I'm doing something right. So.
Yeah, and I'm here to tell you, man. You may not be trying to do it. You may not have an agenda per se, but a theme certainly emerges, and it's a positive, strength-filled theme. And so, yeah, it's there. I'm not the only one to notice it, and I think it's a testament to who you are, that even when you're not trying to necessarily put something across, your inner Jack comes out, which is just this strong, enthusiastic, you can't hide Jack. And anybody who's listening to this podcast and knows Jack, you know that you can't hide who he is, and you wouldn't want to in a million years.
Well, thank you. I appreciate
anyway,
that.
Anyway, always enjoyed the lyrics in Impatient Nation.
Very cool, man. Very cool. I'm blushing over here, man. There's a lot of high praise going on.
You deserve it, man.
Thank you, brother. No, but I mean, I think we had a lot of fun with that band. I think we definitely played a lot, certainly a lot locally, and which wasn't always the easiest thing to do in Tampa, because I think, and I find this to be the case with a lot of bands I'm in right now, where it's like we tend to be. I think people tend to look at like the kind of stuff that we did and the kind of music that I still do now as being sort of middle of the road, in that it's not extremely heavy, but it's not extremely like pop either. Mm-hmm. It's like somewhere in the middle, and sometimes it's difficult to find an audience. We didn't necessarily get to accomplish in the 3 years we were together, like certainly the things that you managed to do with Lives Page and the things that I managed to do with Lives Page, and that, we didn't really open for anyone who was particularly big. We didn't really play any big festivals. I think we played some good shows over the years. I think we made a record that I'm really proud of. Got a little, I don't remember if we got any radio airplay from it. We may have. I'm not sure, but certainly, I mean, I can tell you on an artistic level, I was very satisfied with what we managed to accomplish.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you said it that way. Sorry, I don't know if I'm interrupting you or if this
No. Please go ahead.
You said I'm glad with what we proud of what we accomplished artistically. And I think that's very much the takeaway, at least for me, from Impatient Nation. Certainly, it wasn't as quote unquote commercially successful of an endeavor as Lives Page had been earlier, but it was the evolution of me as a musician. I was a better bassist. I was I knew a lot more going on, and the guys. I'm not going to say anyone. It was a different evolution, and what came out of it was a good piece of artwork. And for me, because kind of my parting gift to you guys, I don't know if you remember, my parting gift was to get the record mastered by Preston Smits,
right?
Who says hi, by the way.
Yeah. What's up, Preston?
I told him I was doing this podcast, and he wanted to say hello to you. But that was kind of, in fact, the CD hadn't even been produced by the time I left.
Right.
So
I think we were still in the studio when you had kind of talked to us about what you were planning on doing. And I can tell you with all honesty, from my end and from the other guys, there was never any animosity regarding your decision to head out. Because I think at that point we were all like, I think we were all a little bit older than we were when we were in college. We all kind of realized, like, okay, like your plan is to go back home to Colorado to go to law school and pursue a career. And it's like, like what were we going to do? Say no? like we weren't going to say no, man. Stay here in our band and, don't pursue a high paying career and better yourself. Stay with our band because we're going to make it. Like, it just, we were realistic enough to realize that that's, we couldn't stand in your way of doing that.
Yeah. And, I didn't say this the last time we recorded this around, but I wanted to say it now. Unfortunately, as much as I enjoyed Impatient Nation, I didn't give you guys my best. I wasn't my best version of myself at the time. So even if I'd have given you everything I had, it wasn't as good as I could have been. And I also wasn't really focused because, I had the finance career during the day that I was preoccupied with, and then I had, law school applications on the mind. And so, we talk a lot about Impatient Nation through these rose-colored glasses, but I decided I wanted to be honest with you and to Justin and Matt and Kyle if they ever hear this. I'm to the extent that I didn't offer you the best version of myself. I'm sorry for that. I wish that I would have. Now, I appreciate you guys having understood my need to go to law school. But it's one of those things that I just wish that I had been in a better place to give you guys a better bassist at the time. So that's kind of I know it got a little heavy quick, and I didn't give you any warning, but I had
that's fine.
I didn't feel I did the last conversation justice. So I'm glad that we got the opportunity to do this again. And again, Matt, Justin, Kyle, if you're around, I truly appreciate you guys. And if I had it to do again, I would have been more focused in the band. But I'm not saying that we didn't have a great time. We definitely did. I just, looking back, there are things I wish that I'd have done differently, and I wish that I'd have been a better bandmate to you guys at the time.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I appreciate the sentiment behind that. I don't think any of us really felt that you weren't giving us your best. I thought we were all really satisfied with what you brought to the band, and we had started to write a lot more up until the time that you said that you were planning on moving back home.
Right.
I think that whole thing you said, the lack of focus there. I'll put it this way. I don't think there was anyone in the band who wasn't guilty of that at one point or another, myself included. But I think that's what a part of this is that it was a learning experience for everybody. And I think, we all kind of learned what we wanted and what we didn't want out of things. And I think, at least I would hope that everyone is, sort of a little older and wiser for it. As far as I can tell, everyone is in a good place. Everyone, at least I know that I get along with everybody from that camp.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And again, perhaps it's just a product of being your own worst critic. I know that I wasn't perfect. I know what I didn't do perfectly or could have done better. But for what it's worth, I just wanted to throw it out there. That I needed to get that part off my chest in order to be able to, in order to free myself, in order to look at Impatient Nation for the beautiful thing that it was, which was 5 guys making some super cool music, when we'd go to Lakeland for the little hideouts, that was a blast. And
yeah.
we had some good shows. We made some great music and, made some friends. So now that I've said that, for whatever it is, I'm glad that it didn't show through too much, but I knew, and I just needed to tell you guys that, so that I can move forward and appreciate Impatient Nation for what it was.
Definitely, and I think definitely in all fairness to those guys, certainly I think the fact that we decided to call it a day when we did was probably the best thing for all of us, because it was one of those points where it's like, and this was after you had already left. There was a point in the band where, like, I think we were all getting a little bit burned out and a little bit miserable with where things were going, and I probably didn't help much by moving, to several hours away and having to commute and everything else that was going on. But certainly each of us had different attitudes about what we wanted. And I think at that point we decided, you know what, I would rather us just all be friends rather than be disgruntled bandmates.
Yeah.
And just each of us go do what we want to do. And it seemed like it's worked out for the best.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't talked to those folks in a while. It sounds from me, from what I've heard from you, they're doing well, and you're certainly doing well, both in life and with music. So, everything, like you said, is a learning experience. Impatient Nation was I'm very thankful to you for calling me that night, because it was another one of those great life experiences, and there's just. Because I don't envision, and I think you might want to talk about this later, but because I don't envision necessarily much in the way of being in a band in the future, I look back and I had two major bands. There was high school, there was Jameson, but there were two major bands, Lives Page and Impatient Nation. I'm proud of both of them. I'm glad to have been part of both of them, and you were part of both of them. So yeah. Thank you, sir.
Definitely. And I mean, who knows if Impatient Nation would have been what it was had you not picked up the phone, and who knows what would have happened with that. Yeah. I don't know. It could have been something completely different than what it was. It could have been nothing. We don't know. But from 2011 on, when you moved back home to Colorado, you went to law school, and then at some point after law school, taking the bar, you would realize that you had a new passion, and that was running in marathons, and that inspired your new blog called Miles Away. And unfortunately, it took us about an hour and a half, however long it has been to get here. But at least that's what you're doing now. And I felt that was a perfect reason for you to be on the podcast and not just reminisce on where we've been, but also talk about where you are right now and where you're going with it.
Yeah, so thanks for the plug, and we touched on it a little bit earlier, I think maybe in the intro. But so yeah, I graduated law school last year, 2015.
Mm-hmm.
And for years, while I was in law school, I saw people graduating, and the next day, I'm not kidding you, the next day you start bar prep. Which is, so, people are having graduation parties for you as if there's something to celebrate, when you know that the most next couple months of your life start the next day. So, mom and dad are planning the graduation party, and you're just like, guys, can we just have a bar passage party? Because there's no point in celebrating until then. Anyway, these people who are my friends and colleagues, graduating and coming out at the end of July after taking the bar, looking as if they had one foot in the grave, sallow, overweight, malnourished, tired. Anyway, I swore I wasn't going to do that. So I had a great setup. I had a law firm here. It's not really a firm. It's a couple of attorneys that share an office together, a house here in Denver. They hired me to in effect, answer the phones over the summer, and my only job other than to answer the phones was to study for the bar. Great setup. So I got my studying done, my 8 to 10 to 12 hours a day while I was at work. And I was able to, there was just a lot going on in my life. It was not a calm time.
Mm-hmm.
And I resolved I was going to come out of the bar in the best shape of my life. So I started pounding the pavement. And So it started I'd say end of May last year, right after graduation, and it's become a passion of mine. I would have never in a million years thought that I would love to run. For all the passions that we've discussed that I have, music, politics, I didn't think running was going to be one of them, but it stuck. I was in great shape when I took the bar, passed it. And as soon as I got out of the bar, I started training for longer runs. I had started training for a half marathon before the bar, finished that. And then now I finally making a lot of long, because I know that I'm rambling. I injured myself in a bicycle accident, which we can talk about a little bit more if you'd like. But so that delayed my progress. But I finally ran my first marathon actually a month ago today, July 31st.
Oh, wow.
I ran the San Francisco Marathon.
That's right. And on your blog, you've posted pictures of you running across the Golden Gate Bridge with all this mist and just this great. Yeah. There's this great selfie shot of you and just seeing the look of determination on your face, and it was such a cool shot. I mean, I mean, just the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. I've never been there, but it's certainly one of the most iconic bridges in the world. And getting to actually run across there must have been just a surreal experience.
It really was. The city of San Francisco is, I'd been there once before in high school, but I hadn't had a chance to really get to know it. And I can't say that I had. I spent 5 days there, so I don't know the city. I don't claim to know the city, but it's beautiful, and it's not like any other place I've been to. The culture is diverse. It's a gorgeous city architecturally. The colors are the California pastel that you expect to see. It's got this crazy fog that it actually has a name, Carl the Fog. Okay. And it's always this fog that's kind of around the city. It has the city itself has microclimates, so it'll be really warm at one block, and then it'll have fog and be a little cold. So you've always got to dress in layers. Anyway.
It's got those rolling hills, so it's. I mean, yep. Well, you live near the mountains, so I'm sure you're you know all about altitude and how that affects climate and all that stuff.
Yeah, but I wrote about this in my last blog, which I think I may have written since you and I recorded the first time. I finally got around to memorializing my marathon experience, and I kind of want to talk about that, but I'll tell you the bridge was something that I dreamt about this whole training since I decided I was going to run the San Francisco Marathon in early May of this year. And so for months, every mile that I spent running, I knew it was for that purpose, and I was going to be running out and across, out and back across the Golden Gate Bridge. And one of the key things there, and I talk about it in my latest post, was living in the moment. And you spend so much time looking forward to something that if you're not careful when it's happening, it'll pass you by in an instant. And so I did everything I could to just make those. You're trying to run fast, right? Mm-hmm. You're trying to get a good time. I'm not trying to win the race, I promise you that, but you're trying to get a good time, and so you're running as fast as you can. And it's important to, at the same time, spend as much time in that moment, stretch that moment out as long as possible to really embrace it, because sooner, and it's very much true in my head, sooner than I ever thought I was back across that bridge, not to run it again for a whole other year. So I'm glad that I spent the time really taking in that moment, an iconic moment of my life for sure.
No doubt. Do you listen to anything in particular while you're running, or do you tend to leave the headphones off to kind of get inside your own head a little bit and try and think about these deeper thoughts that you mentioned? Or
So I definitely get to those deeper thoughts, but it's always with music. I've run something like 1,200 miles since last May. I'm pretty sure. Let's leave a little bit of leeway in there. Let's say I've run 1,200 miles. I'll say that 1,180 of them have been with music. I absolutely need music to get me through a race. And I'm glad you brought that up. We didn't talk about this last time.
No, we didn't.
It's so when I was training for my first half marathon, which seems like several iterations of me ago, but it was just last October. I actually trained, on Spotify, I created a half marathon playlist.
Sure.
And I knew my pacing, so I knew I needed to hear this song around mile 5 or this song when I was slow around mile 10.
Mm-hmm.
So I scripted that and, pretty much knew what was coming. I didn't have the thing memorized. It was something, 2 hours worth of music. So I didn't have it memorized, but I knew that, generally I'd be slogging around mile 11, and that's about the right time to have Lose Yourself by Eminem come up, and
sure. Oh yeah. Once that riff kicks in,
yeah, and then it's like, oh well, I can't slow down now because
right.
Eminem's telling me that I'm got to lose myself and I got to take advantage of my opportunities.
You only get one shot. Do
exactly.
Not miss a chance.
Or and I knew that I'd be Bittersweet Symphony by The Verve was my finishing song. So I finished the race, that first half marathon with Bittersweet Symphony. But so one thing I did, and this goes to my trying to let go of control sometimes. I'm bad at that, and I'm bad at trying to control things. So to let go is a good therapeutic thing for me, to let the universe take care of itself. I created a marathon playlist. But I didn't script it. It had most of the songs from my half marathon and then doubled it from other things that I'd since gotten onto. And what I did is, the half marathon was all pretty much either, it was all hard rock except for Bittersweet Symphony and then, the rap anthems that I mentioned.
Sure.
Because you're pounding away for 2 hours. You're going to get through this, man. The marathon was, it's 4 hours of, some soul searching. You got to find a way to get from mile 20 to 26. In fact, you don't run. Most training programs don't have you run more than 20 miles. So when I ran the 26.2, I had never run 21, 22, 23, 20. So I let Spotify do the work. I just put it on shuffle. I said, universe, you're going to give me the music I need at a certain time. And you're also, I allowed for some slower music, some more introspective music to come through, some more, I wouldn't say, I'm not listening to Enya. That's not happening. But
right. No, but I see what you're saying in terms of having those peaks and valleys.
Exactly.
And in terms of having, you can't be on, you can't be turned up to 11 the entire thing. You're running a marathon. It's not a sprint. You got to know how to pace yourself a little bit. And certainly the music would reflect that. And the times where you need to come down a little bit and just kind of not necessarily go fully mellow with it, but just maybe something a little more mid-tempo, maybe something a little slower, and then maybe get back to sort of the heavy driving stuff.
You said it perfectly, man.
Nice.
That's exactly what it was. You can't be at 11 all the time. You need the peaks and valleys. So I'm looking at the list now, and it's everything from The Outsider by A Perfect Circle, which was the start of my half marathon playlist, to things like In a Little While by U2. Things that are much more chill. So it's. I'm looking at it now, and I know I'm stuttering, and I apologize for that. But it's so cool to see the songs that got me through. Lucky Man by The Verve. Oh my gosh, that song was that song got me through a lot of miles. Just as you're running, where I run out in the suburbs of Denver, I do a lot of running in the cities, but when I do my long runs, it's generally out in the suburbs, and I can see the entire Rocky Mountain range from Long's Peak to the north and Pikes Peak to the south. And to be running along that and seeing this majesty that is the Rocky Mountains, I'm a very lucky man. And so that one has a special place in my heart.
No worries. Now I got to ask, you're running in the Rockies. Was there any John Denver on that playlist?
My mom would be so disappointed to hear, no, no, there's no John Denver.
uh,
Um, although I'll tell you what, he was my first concert as a kid.
well, there you
My
go.
mom took me to John Denver, in Denver, of course,
Of
and
course, as you do.
it was a big thing. I remember where I was when he died. It was a
Yeah.
big thing for my family. I don't know
Oh,
if it
no,
was
no
necessary.
doubt, no doubt. No,
So,
rest in peace, John Denver. But
yeah, yeah.
but yeah, man. I didn't think we'd be talking about John Denver on
No,
this at all. But that's where these things go sometimes.
I love it. Oh, it's so
Yeah,
great.
gotta love it. But yeah, so you've been doing the podcast. I'm sorry, you've been doing your blog for a while.
Just to hear me just agree with you outright. You're like, yeah, you're doing this podcast.
Well, maybe that might lead to a podcast. We don't know. I mean, you could always do something like that about running, but certainly you have Miles Away Denver. It's out there right now. Do you think that people might, people who maybe not necessarily lawyers, but people who are also professionals might look at that and see that as another way of, as sort of a form of inspiration or creative outlet, or what do you think people might take away from your blog?
So its purpose, there are two things I'd like to touch on here. The purpose is I'm not just writing race reviews. You're not going to my rundown of the San Francisco Marathon doesn't tell you what happens at mile 2 or what I thought of the expo or anything like that. I'm kind of taking more of a creative writing approach to trying to. I don't claim to have a monopoly on these ideas at all. I think you can get them from a number of different places. I happen to get a lot of my deep kind of reveals about my purpose in life, the universe, how I fit in with it. It comes to me while running.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of people out there doing some great stuff about running. People write about it. The Ginger Runner is a guy on YouTube and has podcasts and gear reviews. And everyone's contributing to this conversation. I wanted to add, I wanted to contribute, but I also wanted to make sure that what I was feeling was out there. So I don't think you need to be a professional to relate to this. It certainly is why I started running, and so if you are, it certainly it may strike close to home. But it's about the human experience. It's about gratitude, and it's about gratitude, but it's also about knowing that things aren't always going to come up roses, and how to work through that. So very much, it's just I'm trying to be as insightful as I can. While also knowing that I don't have all the answers or even most of the answers. So I try to make sure I'm humble while also putting a point across that I found prescient at the time.
Absolutely, and I think the good thing about stuff like that is it gives you a forum to express yourself and to put those ideas you have and your experience out there, and hopefully if other people relate to it, great. But if not, otherwise, it's still an extension of your personality. It's still a form of expression, much like what this podcast is for me. So it's because I remember starting this about a year ago, and Christina, my wife, would ask me, is like, Jack, you're doing a podcast? Like, who do you think's going to listen to that? I'm like, well, I don't know, but I know that I want to do it, and I'm sure. Whoever is interested in listening to me talk for a while might want to hear that. So who knows? And it's a good thing to do. And I think, as long as I think there's truth in it. I think it's, no one else is telling you what to say or editing you. It's all 100% coming from you. And I think that's the good thing about it.
Yeah, I think it's important, whatever you're passionate about, to contribute to the conversation, whether it be a podcast or a blog, or it's even if no one writes it. And that's the thing, when I get done, I put off writing my blog for 3 weeks on the marathon because I was scared of finalizing the experience into words. I was scared to put it into ink. And I finally did. And the reviews have been great. I'm very proud of what I wrote. But even if no one had read it at all, uh, I was really happy with it, and it did a good job. It did my experience with the San Francisco Marathon, my first marathon, it did it justice. And I probably needed that as a human before I could move on to the next runs. So now before it was this looming giant. And I couldn't, because I had to write about the marathon. Of course, after the marathon, you don't write about you don't go see Metallica and then write about some coffee shop guitarist you saw on the way getting there, right? So anyway, it was a great relief, and so yeah, I agree with you, and I think your podcast has great appeal, and even if no one listened to it, it's doing something for you, and it's certainly doing something for the people who are participating in it, and clearly people are listening to it. So anyway,
very cool.
Yeah.
That's great. I mean, like I said, it's like, one of the most, one of the best gifts we have is that we have our own voice and we have our own way of communicating and speaking our truth out there. And you're putting your truth out there through Miles Away. And I think it's a good thing. And I think no matter what you end up doing, whether it ends up, as an attorney or as a politician or as a musician, or as a writer, I think you always put a lot of truth and genuine thought and emotion and intention behind whatever you do. And that's always one of the things that has been such a good thing about our friendship, is that we've always been honest with each other and always been supportive of one another. And that's a good thing. So I'm glad we're capturing that here for the podcast. And I'm trying not to ramble too much myself, but I'm glad that we got to sit down and reminisce on all this stuff and talk about what you're up to now. And so I think we might just wrap it up here. I think before we close it up, do you want to promote your blog or promote anything else that you have? Please go ahead and plug away.
Okay. Well, first of all, you can't be genuine. That's a fantastic compliment. If that ends up on my headstone, I've done the right thing, done something right in this world. So thank you for that. Jack, let me just tell you, man, I'm glad we got to do this twice because it's always a pleasure to spend so much time with you. You're truly a unique human being, a fantastic man. The world is better having you on it. So it's always a pleasure to work with you in whatever capacity it is. So keep going with the podcast. You're with the band. Don't ever give up. I know you won't. With regard to the plug, I guess I'll plug it.
Thank you very much for all those kind words.
You're welcome. You can find me best. Again, I hate to love Facebook, but I do. Facebook, if you just search Miles Away Denver, you'll find. On Facebook, I'm doing more than just a blog. I'm sharing other people's ideas. Whether it be a gear review or a tip or maybe something about how we used to be persistence runners in Africa, any number of things. So I've got that. You can find me on Twitter, Miles Away Denver. The blog is milesawaydenver.wordpress.com. And again, I hope that when people read it, it's worth their time, because I certainly love. I love to be able to as you said, speak the truth, and I'm thankful and grateful that I've got that opportunity.
Definitely, man. Yeah, absolutely. milesawaydenver.wordpress.com is the blog. Casey, thank you so much for coming on here, man. This has been such a pleasure.
Thank you, Jack. It's been great. Have a good night.
Thank you again to Casey Krizman for just giving such a wonderful conversation, wonderful interview. Like I said, we had tried it before, but it didn't work out. But I'm glad that we got to do this again. It's always a great thing for me personally to catch up with this guy. If you were a fan of any of my old bands, Lives Page or Impatient Nation, this is, I'm sure this must have been great just hearing everything from his side, all the behind the scenes stories from my side. Hopefully you enjoyed it as much as I did recording it. So thank you again to Casey for coming in and doing that. I have so many upcoming events with Vertebreaker, especially since last episode we had here. We have several shows in the Orlando area, starting with Friday, September 23rd at Buchanan's in Winter Springs. That is brought to you by Alicorp Productions. We will be there with Blame the Mono, Relic, and we'll have a special acoustic performance by our good friend April Rose of Auditory Armory. And I would get there early for that because there may or may not be a few surprises in there. I'm not going to say what it is, but I'll just leave it at that. You'll definitely want to be there for that. That's all I can say. Next month, we will be also playing with April and her full band, Auditory Armory. We will be at a Petrified Forest, which is a haunted house attraction in Altamont Springs, which is just north of Orlando. That'll be a really interesting thing. I think it'll be free to come see us, and but we definitely encourage you to take advantage of the haunted house attraction to buy tickets for that. That will be very popular, be very crowded, so make sure you go and check that out. It's a Thursday night, Thursday, October 27th. Just before Halloween, so if you're so inclined, if you're into haunted houses, you'll definitely want to check out A Petrified Forest, especially that night when we're playing. A little bit later, we will also be going to the West End Trading Company in Sanford, which is just northeast of Orlando. We will be there along with that show is being presented by Super Fox Promotions. That is a Veterans Day benefit. We will be playing that show along with Zombie Toe, Arakara, Kirov, and Frequencies. Definitely don't want to miss that if you're in the area. That's Friday, November 11th. And now, for everyone in the Melbourne, Brevard area, we haven't forgotten about you either. Tickets are on sale now for Black Saturday, which is a all-day festival on Saturday, November 26th. Man, you will not want to miss that. That will be headlined by the legendary southern rock band Blackfoot, along with Bobaflex, Kellen Heller, Fit for Rivals, Oblivious Signal, Lydia Can't Breathe, which Ryan from Vertebreaker also happens to play in. There will be Whole Wheat Bread, 21 to Burn, and Spasm. We will be part of the second stage. That is the acoustic stage. Now, headlining that will be Jason Todd, former podcast guest of mine. You know him from the bands Shinedown and Fuel. Joining him will be singer Trista Mabry. We will be playing not one but two acoustic sets. And we will also have our good friend Dominic St. Charles of Verne playing an acoustic set as well. So definitely make sure you catch that. Black Saturday Festival will be located at Space Coast Harley-Davidson in Palm Bay and will be brought to you by Blind Anxiety Entertainment. Go to blindanxietyentertainment.com for more details. And then finally, on Friday, December 16th, we will be at The Haven in Winter Park. That show will be brought to you by Madam Suicide Productions. Join us along with Inner Demons, Armada, Axiom, and No Self. There will be a Toys for Tots donation box. It'll be a good, rock and roll Christmas show. So that is our schedule for the rest of the year. It's just so exciting. We're glad to be back in Orlando. We've had the toughest time getting booked out there, but now we're back. We are back in Orlando, and we definitely want to try and grow our audience there, and hopefully continue to get more shows and get more people out there, and make sure that people are aware of what Vertebreaker is and what kind of show that we bring, and we want to see you guys out there. Hopefully we can come to see you wherever you are listening from. And that is it for this episode of the Phoenix Report. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at JackXConnor. Like me on Facebook at facebook.com/JackConnorMusic. Also, feel free to check out the band at www.vertebreaker.net. And if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, make sure you email me at jackconnorpodcast@gmail.com or tweet me with the hashtag Phoenix Report. And if you are listening to this on YouTube or iTunes, make sure you subscribe, leave a comment, and go back and listen to all the other episodes. Thank you very much for listening. This has been the Phoenix Report. I'm Jack Connor. I will see you guys later. Bye-bye.